how drift competitions work. So first we have to discuss the different zones. We have to understand them. First we have touch and goes, outside zones, inner or inside clips, no-go zones, and initiation markers used in Formula Drift a lot. So first we have touch and goes. So this is a zone where you dip your wheels in, and as long as you hit that zone, it's marked. So then we have outside zones. Outside zones are usually long on the outside of corners, as you can see here. Look. So we have outside zone 1, this is Long Beach of Formula Drift, outside zone 1, outside zone 2, and over here there's a better example, outside zone 1. Look, it's quite long out here. We have over here outside zone 2, outside zone 1, so as you can see they're pretty long zones. And usually these zones would have, for example in RDS, would have 3 strips, 3 lines, and the deeper you go in, the more points you'd get on these strips. They'd be marked. So then we have inner or inside clip. So this is on the apex of the corner. Pretty much you dip your front wheels inside this zone, and it's filled up. It's good. So for example, over here at Long Beach, we have this one just over here. You'd go from touch and go 2, you dip your front wheels over here, and that's marked. That's good. Then we have no-go zone. In RDS, it's used quite a lot. So over here, we're going outer zone 1. Then we go over here. We try not to go in the zone. No-go zones are zones where we do not try to go, where the drivers do not try to go. If they do in a qualifying run, for example, points would be reducted. Unless, for example, a chasing driver is behind a leading driver and is trying to keep up. Usually in RDS, for example, I know for sure that in RDS it is actually allowed for the chasing driver to go a bit inside the no-go zone to keep up with the leading driver. Although it is preferably not done, but you can go as a chasing driver inside the no-go zone. So, and then we have initiation markers. So as you can see in Long Beach over here, we have these 3 cones, 2 and then 1. The best situation is that the driver is starting over here and initiates by the 3 cones, and then pretty much goes over here, powers out touch and go 1, outer zone 1, outer zone 2, over here, touch and go 2, then dip the front wheels into inside clip 1, then power out to the outside to the finish. That would be a nice run. And then we're going to discuss the typical competition format. So this is a very typical format of motorsports, where we have first the practice, then qualifying, and then we have the battles finally. For qualifying, the drivers have to drive the layout according to the zones, and drifting is a judged sport mostly, so except for D1GP, for example. D1GP, they do rely a lot on the electronics, on sensing the drift angle, the speed, etc. But in general, drifting is mostly a judged sport. And points are given for qualifying. So, because obviously, for example, in, I don't know, Formula 1 qualifying, you are looking at the time, but in qualifying for drifting, we're looking at the points, since it's judged mostly. Yes, more points are given, of course, for driving more zones and going deeper. For example, on the outer zones, as I explained, there are the 3 strips or 3 lines, and the deeper you go in, then so the last line, pretty much, the more points you get. That's what I mean by going deeper. If I go back over here, so on this outside zone, for example, there'd be 3 lines over here, and the deeper you go in, so the more outside you go, the more points you'll get. Spinning out opposite drift, so drifting in the opposite direction of the layout. What I mean by opposite drift is, for example, we're drifting towards the left, but our layout is supposed to be where we're drifting towards the right. So that would be opposite drift, where we're drifting in the opposite direction of the layout. And stopping would equal 0 point run. many competitions have multiple qualifying rounds for drivers. So usually there are 2 qualifying rounds for drivers, and the highest point run would be counted as the qualifying result. For many competitions, points are given for fluidity, commitment, style, angle, and speed. So the run with the highest points is counted as the qualifying result. And the drivers would always try to make it into the top 32. So they would always try to qualify at least 32nd place or anywhere higher. Of course, the higher the better. But if they get below 32 as a result, then they will get disqualified and not make it to the battles. So then we go on to the battles. The battles work by elimination. So we would first start with the top 32. We'd go on to the top 16, then 8, 4, and at the top 4 we have the semifinals. So there'd be 2 drivers go up against each other. So 2 pairs of 2 drivers going up against each other. Now, the 2 drivers who win from these 4 drivers would go up against each other, these 2 who won, to determine the first and second place. Now, the 2 drivers who lost these 2 rounds would go up against each other to determine the third and fourth place. That's how it works, basically. And then we have multiple judges who would determine who gets the win. So proximity in tandem drifting is a huge factor, of course. So the chasing driver would always try to stay as close as possible to the leading driver, even if this means that the leading driver is not filling up the zones as much as he should. The chasing driver has to be ready to make these adjustments while drifting to keep up with the leading driver. So then the leading driver has to do as clean of a run as he can. So the leading driver has to pretty much forget the chasing driver and imagine that he is doing a qualifying run. Of course, the chasing driver has to get as close as possible, basically door to door. Both can't spin out, stop, or opposite drift, so the same applies from qualifying. The judges would be looking out for the way the drivers drift the layout. So they hit the zones, smooth, etc. This is a big factor, especially for the leading driver, since he is trying to do pretty much a qualifying run. And also, there's one thing. You'll see this a lot when you watch online. So there's this thing called one more time. And what happens is that sometimes when the judges can't determine who gets the win, the drivers will go up against each other again for the judges to have another go at seeing who will win this round. And well, the best way to understand drifting is to watch live streams or watch YouTube videos on drifting, and you'll understand in no time, really. So, and also you'll see one more thing quite a lot. For example, in Formula Drift, burnout boxes. So when you see drivers going in figures of eights or going in circles, and they turn and understeer, and then they power slide, those are the drivers heating up the tires before a run, and usually they warm themselves up, not heat themselves up. But yeah, that's that. And thanks for watching.